Hi, my name is Trish, and in this video, I will be reviewing some ARCs that I received from NetGalley. So it's been a long time since I've filmed anything, and it's not you, it's me. But I filmed a birthday message. Minutes earlier for one of my closest friends, and I thought since I'm presentable, I might as well take advantage of my current appearance and film something. So for this review, I will be talking about 6 of a number of ARCs that I requested and received from NetGalley. I haven't really gotten into NetGalley or into receiving ARCs in general until this summer, because receiving ARCs didn't really appeal to me because I always thought I didn't have the time, but since the quarantine I do have the time now, so I thought why not put it to good use. So this first batch of ARCs are pretty short ones. Most of them are graphic novels because I still am getting into the swing of things when it comes to ARCs, but I'm hoping that I'll be able to get a hang of things so that I could read more and hopefully film more, but we all know that's not going to happen, or if it will be a long time coming. So the first book on my list the first book that I read was Forte by, I'm going to butcher these names, I'm sorry. It was written by Manon Fugel and illustrated by Kim Consigny. I'm so sorry. So Forte follows Flavia, a young woman who grew up in a poor village in Brazil. At a young age, she acquires this fascination towards playing the piano, and it is quickly revealed that she is actually a gifted pianist. Like, she has a lot of potential to be a really good professional pianist. And so we follow her journey as she gets a scholarship to one of these prestigious music schools in Paris to pursue her dream of becoming a professional pianist. So Forte is a graphic novel, and I finished it in one night. Despite the short read, it's actually a very touching, very sometimes heavy, but very impactful read. There were parts of the story where it felt sort of clipped or rushed, but I didn't think this diminished the impact of the entire story. I also thought that the illustration complemented the script really well. Like I said, the script sort of flowed fast and quickly, and if it had been another type of illustration or art, I don't think it would have worked as well, because the art is also very flowy and fluid, so it really amps up the situation or the emotions that the scene is trying to convey. But what I really like about Forte is following Flavia coming to terms with her own independence and realizing that she doesn't have to do everything alone, and so she develops these really good and precious relationships with a number of people. There was this one scene where they had to do a recital, and one of her roommates / friends gave her a gift, and it was a really gorgeous dress. And Flavia, coming from a poor family and wanting to be sort of independent without relying on anybody else, she sort of took this as an insult, and so her friend had to talk to her and make her realize that, sometimes people give or help not because they pity you, but because they just love you and want to give you this. Flavia also develops a romantic relationship with the son of, I think it's one of the, I don't know what they're called in music schools, but he has a big position, a really influential position in that music school. This is one relationship that I didn't like in the book because for me it was very toxic and unhealthy. Like, they really didn't have a lot in common, and while that's not necessary in relationships, it's just like every scene with them together just didn't mesh well. Like, they always clashed against each other, and when the book ends, there's this insinuation that things ended well for them, but not really. So it wasn't a very satisfying relationship for me. Nevertheless, this book was still a very enjoyable graphic novel to read, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read is Weird Dream Society, and this is an anthology edited by Julie C. Day, and there are actually a number of authors that have contributed to this anthology. So Weird Dream Society is basically a collection of short speculative fiction stories that expand throughout a number of specific subgenres like horror, sci-fi, other subgenres. I can't think of any other genres right now. My one brain cell is not cooperating. So I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars, and I had to commend it because this anthology really is an effort in creativity and originality and the ability to immerse oneself in different worlds and lives that are not your own. There were a number of good ones, some bad ones, and some really excellent ones. For the bad ones, my general criticism will be that it seemed directionless, and I'm not sure if it's because they're short stories, so there's this kind of limitation to how long or how much they can tell. But for many, if not all of these stories that I did not like, I noticed that they were sort of trying to do too much. They were saying a lot of things, but at the same time not really saying anything at all. That makes any sense. And then there are the good and excellent ones, which successfully managed to transport me and convey thoughts and provoke strong emotions from me. There are 3 stories in particular that were real standouts for me, and these are Crossing by A.C. Weiss, Jewel of the Pashwa by Jordan Corella, and They Said the Desert by A.T. Greenblatt. The next book that I read is another graphic novel, and it is Something is Killing the Children, Volume 1 written by James Tinian IV, illustrated by Werther de Lidera, and colored by Miguel Muerto. Something is Killing the Children is a horror graphic novel about children and their monsters that are realized in the most horrific way. Like in this world, in different towns, children are being killed, eviscerated, eaten. It's gory as fuck, and it is, at risk of sounding like a psychopath, a delightful read. I know it's funny to say about a story where kids are getting killed, but this book actually has some warmth to it. Like, it's not gory for gore's sake. Well, of course, there's the shock value, but it really gives time to give depth to the characters, which are the families and friends of those being killed. And while it's a terrifying read, it's also very sad at times. And I also have to commend the art in this graphic novel because it is sensational. It is amazing. It's paired really well with the script because it manages to convey the horror and the fear that is needed. And it's so unapologetic at showing these scenes. So the really graphic illustrations paired with the spine-tingling script it was one hell of a read, and I gave this graphic novel 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read is The Witches of Willow Cove by Josh Roberts. So this story follows friends Abby and Robbie. Abby finds out that she is a witch, and so she has to train in the
These are not spirit fingers. These are spirit fingers.
Practices of witchcraft with a number of her fellow classmates who are also witches. At the same time, Robbie goes to investigate the disappearance of his stepmother and also the death of his mother years prior that seems to be connected with this group that Abby has recently associated herself with. So there's magic, there's mystery, and there's drama. I was very apprehensive about this book at first because during the first part of the book it seemed like it was going down the path of some very common, very annoying, very toxic stereotypes that I would have loved to leave back in 2010. But I was pleasantly surprised around the middle half part of the book because it took a 180-degree turn and things started to get really good, better, great even. So this is a really witchy story, but I think at its core, this book is really about friendship. And I love how the characters and the relationships here are written with so much complexity, and there's a degree to honesty with how they are portrayed with all its grittiness and messiness. I think with middle grade books, there's this notion that complexity can only go a long way, but there are more middle grade books writing with more nuance, and I think that's really great because relationships and feelings and emotions are complicated and messy at any age. There are 2 cases that I really want to talk about in this book, where I thought it would be pandering to those really annoying tropes that I didn't like, but surprised me by not going down that road. The first is when Abby starts to hang out with her fellow witches, which are her fellow classmates that she hasn't really interacted with. There's this one girl, I can't remember her name, who invites Abby to go practice some spells, and this girl actually found out that she was a witch way before Abby did, so she has the advantage of experience and more time to practice. And there was this scene where Abby was shown to be really gifted at magic. I was honestly nervous because I thought this would be the start of a rivalry between the two of them. But I was really, really glad that as the story progressed, Abby and this girl in particular did not have any rivalry at all. This girl actually turned out to be a very supportive and encouraging character towards Abby. Like every time Abby would accomplish something, she was nothing but supportive and cheerful and just the bestest friend to have. If ever there were moments of competitiveness between them, it was not the unhealthy competitiveness, but it was the kind of competitive where they're trying to build each other up. So I was really glad that the book, instead of making this relationship into a rivalry, instead turned into a very supportive relationship, not only between Abby and this girl, but just the whole coven in particular. The second case that I want to talk about is actually between Abby and Becca. Now, Becca is this girl whom Robbie ends up liking, and they end up as an item. And Abby is understandably jealous and bitter towards Becca because prior to them meeting Becca, Robbie and Abby have actually started having miscommunication problems. And so Abby wrongly assumes that Becca is trying to take Robbie away from her, but as the story progresses, Abby sort of realizes that this is wrong, that this is not the case at all. And while she and Becca, for most of the book, are not really concrete friends, there were a number of scenes between them where they were genuinely friendly towards each other. There was actually this one scene where Abby herself said that it wouldn't be fair of her to be nasty towards Becca just because she's with Robbie. Like, Becca didn't do anything bad to her, and she didn't do anything bad to Becca, so there was really no reason for them not to be nice to each other. Like, okay, maybe we're not friends yet, but at least we can be good classmates to each other. And I really like that because I can't count the number of books I've read when I was a tween or a teen where two girls in the same group just can't get along, and it was refreshing to see this sort of healthy relationship, if not necessarily friendship. But I'm really happy that in the end Becca and Abby do become friends, so that's a plus for me, because I am always a slut for friendship. I also found it interesting that while Abby and Robbie's friendship is constantly hovering over the entire story, both of them actually take different paths and they develop as characters separately. Like, Abby goes on to this subplot where she's practicing witchcraft and gains new friends, which are her coven. And Robbie goes on this other path where he investigates his mother's death and he meets Becca and Zeus and he builds relationships with them as well. But while these two characters are building new relationships, they're also trying to maintain their own friendship. And it's just a dynamic and a way of storytelling that I did not expect, so I was pleasantly surprised. However, I am sad to say that this took me some time to read because I thought the pacing of the plot was pretty dull. There was a lot of talking and not showing with this book, and a lot of the magic system of the history or the reveals were done through conversations and expositions, and instead of it just happening in the scene, and it made the story go on longer than it needed to. And it also kind of messed up the pacing of the book because we go from one scene where it's all just dialogue to this next scene where it's all action, and then back to this scene where it's just all dialogue. So yeah, that really affected my whole enjoyment of the book. But still, it was a really good, really strong book, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. The next book on my list is I also don't know how to say this, so The Mitanes Gang by Loy Clement. I'm really sorry about these pronunciations. I can't even pronounce reality correctly. So the Mitanes, the Mitanes Gang? I'm just going to call it the M Gang because I don't want to keep butchering this book's name on video. The M Gang follows this group of animal children that investigate some very creepy kidnappings of their fellow friends and classmates. Again, another story about children caught up in some really shady business. That was a theme for this batch of arcs. I don't know. So I'm not really sure if the M Gang is marketed towards kids, but I think this is a story that can cater to all ages because as cute and adorable as the illustrations are, and they are absolutely adorable, this story is terrifying. But while it does succeed in scaring me, I think there was a lot of potential for the story to go even deeper and for some scenes to be even scarier. Like, honestly, it could have gone scarier. There were also a number of subplots that I think were not addressed or resolved, so they were kind of left hanging in the air. I'm not really sure if there's another book. Oh, there's another book. So I'm not sure if these subplots are going to be addressed in the next book, but in this book, they weren't. They were just left there in the air, hanging. But this was just such a delight to read. Like I said, the story was creepy and terrifying and scary. The illustrations, surprisingly, was very bright and cute. It didn't clash with the story, it actually complemented the story well. For some reason, it was very whimsical and the characters were endearing. And this was just a delight to read, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. The last book that I read was Heart of the Dragon by Jamie Sullivan, and I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. This book came at the right time. I received it during a time in the quarantine where I was just really down and anxious and sad, and this book was just buttloads of fun. So it follows Madfall, who steals this basket thinking that it's filled with gold, only to find out that it's filled with baby because there's an actual human baby inside, and instead of giving it back, he decides to raise it. So we're basically following this dragon who sees this baby, says, "I am your father now," and raises it. It's just a really fun and light read. The baby, Onan, eventually grows up with Madfall, and their lives are disturbed when Richard, who is this knight in training, stumbles upon their cave/home. And so Madfall is pissed because there's a stranger in his house, and Onan is horny because he's never met another human before, and he is horny. I know it sounds like this book is just some funny, smutty book. It's actually not. It's actually really thoughtful and heartwarming. But really, it's just a happy book. It just gives so much warmth and happiness. And the only reasons this wasn't a 3.5 out of 5 stars is that I thought it was too short. Richard is the most annoying character ever, and I thought the point of view should have shifted between Onan and Madfall instead of just having parts where it focused on one character at a length of a number of chapters. I think the storytelling would have been more dynamic if it was Madfall and then Onan and then Madfall again, instead of just it being Madfall for the first 5 chapters and Onan for the rest. But still, I really like this book, and I highly recommend it if you ever want a good time. That is it for my review of these first sets of arcs. I wish you all well during this pandemic, and I'll see you in the next video.